fundamentals, when you hear that word, we often associate it with negative things, like old or antiquated or useless. And then when we hear the term innovation, we associate it with new or brilliant or useful. And I just don't believe that that's accurate. But to break that down, I'm just going to talk about food. So, quick audience participation moment, if you will bear with me. How many of you have ever eaten food before? Yeah, everybody. Good. That's way less shocking than if someone hadn't raised their hand. So, we're all pretty familiar with food. I am very familiar with food. And food is something we fundamentally need. It fuels our bodies. We have to have food. And that's one of the fundamental purposes of food. And so, fundamental is good. We've created a lot of tools to work with food. So, like knives are one of my particular favorite innovations on food. I really enjoy eating a fresh pineapple. I don't know if you've ever tried to eat a fresh pineapple without also having a knife around to help you in that preparation, but if you don't, it can be a little prickly. Fire is another fun one. Now, we've actually innovated past fire, basically, because now we have like convection ovens and microwaves and things like that, but fire can change the texture, the color, the flavor of food. There is a barbecue restaurant in a town that I used to live in called Black Dog Barbecue, and they have a menu item that's just burnt ends. That's it. And I can tell you from personal experience, it is fantastic. And refrigerators. Refrigerators, we made these magic boxes where we could take things outside the climate and we could stick it in a box and just keep it that way forever until you run out of Freon. But it's amazing. That's like magical. Like, how could you do that? So innovation is good. In order to innovate really well, innovating from a place of consistency is the best way that we can innovate. So we have food, and these guys had food over here, and food is very consistent. So these guys had food over here, and these people had food over here. And one of the ways that we've innovated with food is that they made dishes. And they made some dishes over here, and these people made some dishes over here. And these people said, that looks pretty tasty. And these people said, well, that looks pretty tasty. And then we innovated trade. So innovating from a place of consistency is the best place to innovate from. Now, process is for the purpose of innovation. And I need to stop right there and address this idea. When I say process and food, right away we're thinking, process and food, we don't want these two things together. No, when I say process, what I don't mean is chemically altered, which I think is what most of us jump to. What I mean is a process. I mean repeatable steps that produce a consistent result. So this is an example of a process. You have a seed, and that seed grows into a plant, and it creates produce, and we take that produce, and now we have food, and that's a process. Another example of a process are recipes. One of my particular favorites are the chocolate chip cookie recipes. Now, recipes are really fantastic because they allow us to come back from the future to something that we have that's really good now. So we can keep having this thing over and over because of this recipe. We don't have to invent it. We don't have to innovate this thing all new every time. We can come back because we have this process. But process is also for the purpose of innovation, which means if we have this process already, we have this recipe, it means innovation gets to come in and just make a few tweaks, and now we have butterscotch cookies instead, which to me is very exciting. But process also allows us to recognize really quickly when innovation from scratch is absolutely necessary. So say I want a lasagna. Well, I go get my recipe, right? This is my process for food. But I can quickly see the chocolate chip cookie recipe is not going to get me to lasagna. And so now I know instantly, hey, you need to innovate something new. The resources for innovation are time and human energy. Really conveniently, we all possess those two things fundamentally as humans. And process helps us to get those things back each time we innovate. Because when you break something down to repeatable steps that produce a consistent result, we often call those things habits when we do them a lot. And you know what happens with habits? You get really good at them. They take less and less and less time for you to do them. Let me tell you a little bit about my daughter. When she was 4 months old, it took her 10 minutes to put down a 10-ounce bottle of milk. Now, it takes me roughly the same time to eat half a gallon of ice cream. I am much better at eating than my daughter is. But I've had a lot of time and energy to put in to getting better at that. So now that I can feed myself a lot faster and more efficiently than she can, I have a bunch of time and energy to do other things like go to the gym. Because time and human energy are the only things we need in order to innovate, it means that every human-made process can be made better by another human. And I think that statement stands on its own, but let me break that down for just 1 second. That means that anything man-made, you can make better. You can. So this stage, or these lights, or this building, or this institution, you can make that better. Useful innovation pays attention to the fundamentals of the thing that you're working with. So in the food world, I've seen some really amazing displays that look very attractive, and they're made with food, but they're inedible. And from a chef's perspective, this is not a useful innovation, because one of the fundamental things about food is that you're supposed to be able to eat it. And that's what makes it great. And you might say, well, isn't that just art? And I would say, it's really easy to take something and call it by another name and then say that that's useful innovation. Real useful innovation pays attention to the fundamentals of what a thing is. Not having paid attention to the fundamentals of what something is has let us create some really not very useful things, like overeating, or food that has zero nutritional value whatsoever. If you've ever eaten a circus peanut, you know what I'm talking about. But real useful innovation pays attention to the fundamentals of things. And we have a lot of innovations and creations that have paid attention to those, like vertical farming, or hydroponics, or the greenhouse. And these things are all amazing and useful because they paid attention to the fundamentals. And I really believe that if we pay attention to the fundamentals of a thing, then our ability to innovate with that thing is limitless. Thank you.